All right, if you're an IB history student, you know that the sectional crisis is a massive topic for paper 3. So let's cut right through the noise. We're going to zero in on one core idea, that slavery wasn't just a cause of the Civil War. It was the foundational issue that pretty much made the conflict inevitable. Let's break down exactly how.
To really get a grip on just how central slavery was, just look at this number. By the 1850s, cotton, a crop planted and harvested almost exclusively by enslaved people, made up about half of all U.S. export revenue. Think about that. That's not just a Southern statistic, that's an American one. The entire nation's prosperity was directly tied to this system.
So, how are we going to unpack all this? Well, we've got a clear path. First, we'll follow the money and look at the economic engine. Then, we're going to shift to the powerful human story of resistance and resilience. From there, we'll see how all these tensions just exploded into the great American debate. And finally, how it all led down the road to inevitable conflict. If you can nail these 4 parts, you're going to have an incredibly strong framework for your essays.
Okay, first up, the economic engine. The invention of the cotton gin back in 1793, well, it was a complete game changer. It suddenly made it super easy to process a type of cotton that could grow almost anywhere in the South. And just like that, the crop became wildly profitable, which fueled this huge, aggressive expansion of slavery westward into places like Mississippi and Texas.
And this expansion created what historians call the Cotton Kingdom. Now, this is a key point you need to remember. This was not some backward, dying system. It was a modern, dynamic, and frankly, brutal economic empire built on 3 pillars: the forced labor of millions of people, a massive global demand for cotton, and crucially, the political power to protect the institution of slavery at all costs.
This chart right here, it basically shows you the core economic tension of the entire era. On one side, you have the Southern model, totally dependent on agriculture and enslaved labor. And on the other, you've got the Northern model, a fast-growing industrial economy built on free wage labor. These 2 systems weren't just different, they were on a collision course.
Now, you know, for your IB essays, you've got to have historiography. So historians like Fogel and Engerman made this argument that from a purely business point of view, slavery was highly efficient and profitable. But this brings up a really critical thinking question that you absolutely have to address in your analysis. Does economic efficiency ever justify a system's morality? That is a fantastic point to use for your evaluation.
But you know, this economic engine wasn't fueled by machines. It was fueled by human beings. So for this next section, we have to shift our focus from the balance sheets to the human story of resistance and resilience, the response of enslaved people to a system that was designed to completely crush their spirit. The very foundation of this dehumanization was something called the slave codes. And these weren't just rules. They were actual laws designed to strip away every single aspect of a person's identity. This meant you had no legal rights, your family could be torn apart and sold at any moment, and in a lot of states, it was illegal to even learn to read or write. The whole system was held together by the constant threat and the awful reality of violence.
And this reality is where the work of historian Kenneth Stamp is so important. He argued directly against this pro-slavery idea of paternalism, this myth that enslavers were like kind father figures. Stamp's research showed that no, slavery was fundamentally a system of brutal coercion. This is a crucial counter-argument to have in your toolkit.
But oppression always breeds resistance. And it is so important to understand that resistance wasn't just one thing. It wasn't just violent revolt. It existed on a whole spectrum. You had everyday acts like slowing down your work or breaking a tool. You had community acts like creating secret schools or preserving religious and cultural traditions. And of course, you had open revolt like Not Turner's Rebellion or escaping through the Underground Railroad. All of this shows constant agency and a relentless fight for freedom. And who could possibly explain this drive better than Frederick Douglass himself? This quote is just so powerful because it completely destroys the pro-slavery argument that enslaved people were somehow content. Douglass says the exact opposite. Any little taste of a better life, any slight improvement, it only fueled the fire for total freedom. It speaks to a universal human desire that you just can't extinguish. Okay, so you've got this deep human conflict and this massive economic divide. Well, it was inevitable that it would spill into the national arena. And that brings us to Section 3, the Great American Debate. This is where the country literally began to argue itself apart. This slide right here, this is basically your cheat sheet for any compare and contrast question. On one side, you've got the abolitionist arguments, rooted in the Enlightenment ideals of the Declaration of Independence, religious morality, and the idea that free labor was just better. On the other side, you have the pro-slavery arguments, which got more extreme over time, going from a necessary evil to a positive good, and justified by economics, states' rights, and a really twisted interpretation of the Bible. Now, if you want to push your analysis into those top bands, you have to connect these ideas to the politics of the time. And this is where the historian Eric Foner's work is absolutely essential. He shows how this ideological fight wasn't just some abstract debate, it directly shaped the political landscape. The Northern defense of free labor became the central platform for the brand new Republican Party, making the political conflict a direct reflection of this moral and economic clash.
And that brings us to the end game, our final section. The road to inevitable conflict. We've seen the economic, the social, and the ideological divides. Now let's see how they completely shattered the American political system.
Just look at the acceleration here. In the 1830s, Congress is literally trying to not talk about slavery by passing gag rules. Fast forward to the 1850s, and Americans are actually killing each other over it in bleeding Kansas. The national political parties, the Whigs and Democrats, which used to unite voters from the North and South, they completely collapsed. They were replaced by new parties that were formed specifically around the issue of slavery. The system of compromise was just breaking down in real time. So, the crucial point, the main takeaway is this. By the time Lincoln was elected in 1860, there was just no middle ground left. The debate over slavery had become a zero-sum game. Every political tool that had been used for decades to just paper over the cracks, well, it was now completely useless. The foundational issue was simply too big to compromise on anymore.
So this is the ultimate question that you have to wrestle with in your essays. When you look at these deep, fundamental divisions, economic, moral, and political, was compromise ever truly possible? Or was the conflict, like we argued at the start, just baked into the very foundation of the nation? Answering that is the key to mastering this topic. Good luck.